What's up guys, I'm Jack, and this is Daisy, and welcome to another video. So, spring has kind of sprung, and I just wanted to do a little spring special. So, today's the day we find out if we can beat Elden Ring with only plants. I'll go ahead and put the rules on screen right now, but basically we can only use plants, we can't use any summons other than Egon, because I love Egon, no damage buffing incantations, and we have to get all DLC remembrances. So without further ado, let's get started. So we start the way that we start basically every Shadow of the Erdtree run, and that's by almost dying many times on our way to the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. And this is where it starts to differ, because instead of beating the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, the first boss of the DLC and the easiest boss, we actually died quite a few times. Safe to say I'm a little bit rusty with these DLC bosses after taking a few weeks off for road trip and whatnot. That and our armor probably doesn't help, we barely have any damage negation with this mushroom armor. So what sort of weaponry do we have access to? Well, we have access to a couple of spells including Scarlet Aeonia, the Crucible Bloom spell, and the Erdtree incantation that heals you, which we don't get too much use out of, but still nice to have. And there really aren't too many weapons that we can use. I didn't want to use just sticks, because that's kind of boring, it'd be like 15 different clubs. So instead I chose the Sunflower, Vari's Bouquet, the Thorned Whip, and Romina's Pole Blade. That last one may sound like an odd choice. I always thought that it was Scorpion Stinger, but it's actually a flower bud. Plus it's a pretty cool weapon, and we don't get too many chances to use it. Anyway, after losing a couple of times to the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, we do get this run. Wait, my bad. I think I meant this run. So, every time we started this fight, we would go for a Scarlet Aeonia, and thankfully most of the time we were able to get one off safely. This spell is both amazing and horrible. It does good damage and inflicts Scarlet Rot, which is a great status condition, but it just takes forever to actually cast, and you're stuck in the cast animation for an extended period of time. And the only good thing about that cast animation is that when you do it, you're crouching. Well, you fly up and then you crouch once you hit the ground, which allows you to actually dodge some of the boss's attacks if they go over your head. So, could be worse, I suppose. Anyway, the rest of this attempt was just me using aspects of the Crucible Bloom, which actually does really good damage, surprisingly. And I was just trying to make sure that we could get that Scarlet Rot off, basically on the boss 24/7. And that damage over time got us the win. So, took a few tries, but eventually we did get it. Next up we're heading to Rellana, so we run straight through the castle and immediately past every enemy that we see. I want to point out that I don't really have too many difficult rules on this run in particular. That's because this is a warm-up run after getting back, so my next run is going to be a lot more difficult, but still. We lose to Rellana on our first attempt and then head back in for a second try. We're using Vari's Bouquet for this, and it's a very unique weapon because its damage is just the worst, but it does a decent amount of bleed buildup, which is always helpful. And while we don't do it in this run, you can put the Blood Flame Blade buff on this weapon even though it already has innate bleed, which makes it, again, a really good weapon for inflicting bleed. Anyway. We got a Scarlet Aeonia off on Rellana, which inflicts Scarlet Rot, so while she's taking damage over time, we're also fishing for a Poise Break, which we get, and we get a Riposte, and a Bleed. So, she's already down about a third of her health, and we're just going to spam our Ash of War right there, before getting another guard counter off. We should be getting another Poise Break here any second now, one more jump attack should do the trick, and we can prevent her from entering her second phase briefly, while we get that Riposte off, which doesn't really do that much damage, but damage is damage. And she begins her second phase, so we use an Ash of War, and instead of doing her opening attack for the second phase, she just goes right into a combo, which is interesting. I wonder why she did that. Anyway, she does eventually go for that opening attack, and we can dodge it, before going for some jump attacks to fish for another Poise Break. We didn't get the Poise Break just yet, but we did get off a nice bleed, which takes her pretty low. We go for a jump attack hoping for that Poise Break, but we don't get it. All the while, she's taking damage from Scarlet Rot, which means she'll be dead any second now. We just gotta survive. One last jump attack poise breaks her, we get her riposte off, and we take her down. But she's not dead. Oh god, she's not dead. Okay, one last Scarlet Aeonia takes her down. That was kind of spooky. She must have had literally 1 HP left. Anyway, we can run towards the Shadow Keep next, and I think it's about time that we took on the Sunflowers with a sunflower. So, through the Bonnie Village we went, and into the Shadow Keep Church District we arrived. And after hopping on some rooftops, we eventually made our way to this lever right here, which we pushed, unflooding the flooded district before hopping down, and into the church down here where we can grab a Site of Grace. Eventually we ran all the way down to where the sunflowers actually spawn in the Scadutree base, and we can begin the fight. You would think that using the sunflower against the sunflowers wouldn't be very effective, and while we did die a couple of times, it still does some pretty good damage. These guys have a massive crit multiplier and a pretty small health pool comparatively, so every time we hit their big sunflower head, we just chunk them. That being said, especially with this not great armor, they do a lot of damage to us, so we just gotta be careful. It's not too long before we take out the first one, and then get a riposte to get some extra damage off on the next one. And though we don't do as much damage to the second one, it also wasn't really that difficult. So after a minute of dodging his attacks and going for jump attacks on his big sunflower head, we take out the second one, before getting another riposte, and then taking out the third one. So yeah, took a few tries, but it really wasn't that bad. And since we're already in the church district, I decided that it would be a good time to fight Gaius. So we run through the Shadow Keep, and across the loft section to eventually find the elevator that takes us down to the back gate. And then we lose to Gaius almost immediately. And then we lose to him again. And they say third time's the charm, but in this case it really wasn't, because I used the Ash of War at the exact wrong time. So I decided that I would save the Pole Blade of Bud for a different boss, and instead use our Thorn Whip with the Poison Affinity on it, which I thought was fitting for this run. And as is our main tactic, we get a Scarlet Aeonia off, inflicting Scarlet Rot on Commander Gaius first thing. And after that, we're going to go ahead and whip him as much as we can to try and get a poison off, so we can get that double damage over time, and hopefully swing the fight in our favor. I don't think we're getting a poise break with this whip, but that's okay. On top of poison, it also inflicts bleed buildup, which is super nice, so any bleed that we get will be greatly appreciated. We dodge his combo and get off a guard counter, just about taking him into the second phase, which he should begin after he does that charge. From there, we hop on Torrent and get away from his big AoE attack. So the Ash of War we have on our whip is pretty cool. It's called the Poison Flower Balloons twice, and essentially what it does is decent base damage, but if your target is poisoned or rotted, it will take away the poison or rot, but do a massive chunk of damage instead. So it's pretty cool. I guess the most effective way to use it would be to time how long the poison or rot has been on your enemy, and use the Ash of War right at the end when it's going to wear off anyway, but I'm not that particular about my gameplay, so we don't end up doing that. I then forget how to dodge for about 10 to 15 seconds and just take damage from just about every attack that he throws at us. We thankfully survive, and he took a bleed, which takes him really low, so a couple more whips should do the trick from here. We're one shot, and so is he, so we do one more attack and finish this fight. This, again, took a few tries, but we're still warming up and getting back into the groove of things, so it's totally fine. We run through the Shadow Keep one more time, and head up to Messmer. I planned on using the Pole Blade of the Bud for this fight, but didn't work out that way. Messmer opened up with his opening attack, of course, and our Pole Blade actually does really good damage. The Pole Blade also inflicts Scarlet Rot buildup, but not that much, so we do have to hit him a lot before we can actually get that Scarlet Rot off. Again, we deal a lot of damage in the process, but a single use of our Scarlet Aeonia would have accomplished the same goal a lot quicker. Also, the Ash of War from this weapon kinda sucks. I mean, I'm sure it has its uses, maybe I'm just not good with it, but it feels like it doesn't really do that much damage or inflict that much Scarlet Rot buildup. And it takes so long to get off the full combo that we end up dying in the middle of our Ash of War. So the next attempt, I decide that I'm going to beat Messmer with only Scarlet Aeonia. And again, this actually works kind of well against him, because we can dodge a lot of his incoming attacks during the crouch animation of our Scarlet Aeonia. So it's pretty good, and again, it does pretty high base damage on top of inflicting Scarlet Rot. All of that makes this incantation surprisingly effective in this fight. Phase 2 might be a bit of a different beast, because Messmer moves around a lot more and he also turns into a giant snake. So that might be tough. But as long as he's inflicted with Scarlet Rot, he'll be taking that damage over time, which will hopefully take him pretty low enough to where we can actually take him out with some Scarlet Aeonias. And right as he begins the second phase, he always does this big Fire Slam attack, so we can dodge that easily and get off a guaranteed Scarlet Aeonia first thing. We miss, but we got it off. And even though he's not hit for the initial burst of damage, he is once again inflicted with the Rot, which does take him down pretty low. In the parts that I cut out, we actually only hit him with 2 other Scarlet Aeonias. The rest of the damage was from the Scarlet Rot. So from here, we just need to survive and land one more hit, which hopefully shouldn't be too difficult, right? Well, thankfully, he stands right in the aftermath of our Scarlet Aeonia and takes just enough damage to perish. And from here, I decide to go for Bayle. And I used the Sunflower to take out the Ancient Dragon Man, cause why not, and then Scarlet Aeonia once more to take out the Jagged Peak Drake, on top of Vare's Bouquet, and our Bloom spell. This allows us to speak to Egon and grab his finger, so that we can summon him in our fight against Bayle. So from here we can run up the Jagged Mountain and summon him at the peak. And if you're new to my channel, I always allow Egon because he's the best.
You fail! I hereby vow you will rue this day. Behold the true Egon. Your fear made flesh.
So for Bayle, I actually do end up using the Pole Blade of the Bud, and with Egon's help, we actually get off a lot of damage against Bayle very quickly.
On a scale you might be, foul dragon, but I will riddle with holes your rotten hide. With a hail of harpoons! With every last drop of my being!
So we haven't inflicted Scarlet Rot yet, which kinda sucks, but we did end up getting that beautiful Poise Break and Riposte, taking Bayle down to about half health. We get hit by a lot of his little meteor attacks, but managed to survive his second phase opening. From there we can heal up, and I've just been trying to inflict Scarlet Rot this whole time, but again, our Scarlet Rot buildup isn't very high on the Pole Blade. So we would need to hit him about 13 to 14 times in quick succession to inflict Scarlet Rot. And it's kind of tough to do that on this guy, especially because once we stop hitting him, the Scarlet Rot will dissipate, making it take more hits. So yeah, it's kind of tough. We try to go for the Ash of War, maybe that'll inflict more Scarlet Rot buildup. And since we got stuck in the cast animation until the last second, we end up getting hit by his big AoE roar attack, which kind of sucks. And I really need to just stop trying with this Ash of War because it keeps getting me hit. But thankfully we managed to survive and heal up while he focuses on Egon. He only has about a quarter of his health left, so we can charge up there and just try to get as much damage as we can off on him. Egon's health, along with a couple uses of our Ash of War, deal a hefty amount of damage to him. And we also end up getting that Poise Break again. And we keep spamming the Ash of War because I really want to get that Scarlet Rot off. And finally, towards the end of the fight, we do get off Scarlet Rot, which means that Bayle is done for. And with this fight over, I'm gonna make some breakfast real quick. That's not a segue into the cooking section, by the way, I'm actually gonna make breakfast. Okay, so today we're making some lavender syrup to go with our brand new espresso machine. So I take some dried lavender buds, about a cup of them, and put them in a pot. After that, I'm going to fill it with about 3 cups of water, and then 1.5 cups of sugar. And we're just going to have that on medium heat. So you basically just leave it on medium heat for like 30-45 minutes and diffuse the lavender flavor into the syrup and evaporate some of the water, making it a bit thicker. Just stir it up occasionally. Super easy. And I found the lavender on Amazon. It's supposed to be for like laundry and like bathrooms for smell, but yeah, it's fine. Anyway, this is the new espresso machine I got. One of my buddies actually works at a company that makes these and gave me one for free. And it's super fancy and really nice and makes amazing coffee, so I will never forget this kindness, Jake. You are the best person on the planet. Anyway, yeah, we grind up some beans, tamp it down, and we let this thing get to work. So basically the thing about this machine is you can't really mess it up. It doesn't make the best espresso I've ever had, but it makes really good espresso, especially for a home espresso machine. Like, it's incredible. It even tells you what size you should grind the beans to and times everything for you. It's perfect. Coffee science is crazy, by the way. The only thing that I'm not a fan of is how it froths the milk. It does a great job of making foam, but I don't know. It's not perfect. It is fun to watch though. So our lavender's been on the stove for about 30 minutes now, so it's about done. So after our milk is frothed, we can drain it, or strain it, I guess. And I use a tea infuser for the strainer, and just try to get as much in there as I possibly can. Apologies for the bad camera angle, by the way. I wasn't really thinking when I was filming this. Anyway, the syrup should be a nice rich copper color, and should be a bit thicker than water, but not as thick as maple syrup. We carefully take the very hot syrup out of the sink, pour in a jigger, the small side 1.5 ounces. Again, very carefully because that is extremely hot, and then we pour that in our espresso. That's a double espresso, by the way. That's the standard amount of espresso most lattes come in, or cappuccinos, basically any espresso-based drink. Anyway, we go ahead and pour our steamed milk in there, and you can see that we get a nice dollop of foam on the top, which is just so nice. And with that, we've made a really nice lavender latte. And that's not what I had for breakfast. I actually had a waffle and a piece of bread. It was great. Alright, let's finish up this run. In the meantime, I've been running to the Cerulean coast to grab the Site of Grace at the cross and then head into the Deep Stone Crypt. So, we're taking in the Sunflower for this fight because I think it'll be a pretty good weapon to fight the Putrescent Knight, and on the way we almost perished before quitting out at the last second. And then we almost die again when we spawn in, but thankfully managed to escape. I hate this place. And the Putrescent Knight destroys us on the first try, and the second try, and then the third try as well. So, that was fun. So for this fight, I decided to go for Vari's Bouquet instead of the Sunflower. I don't know why, because the Sunflower has such good base damage compared to Vari's Bouquet, but whatever. We really just don't do any damage per hit, so this is going to be a long fight. The range of the weapon also isn't great, but we do eventually get a nice poise break and riposte off on the Putrescent Knight here. And by the way, he is completely immune to bleed damage, so I, again, have no idea why we're using Vari's Bouquet here. I do not remember my thought process. But we slowly chip down his health, eventually taking down about a quarter of his health. Anyway, the pole blade of the bud would have been a much better weapon because he actually has a very small scarlet rot resistance, so that would have been kind of smart to use for this fight, but it's too late to change. Alright, we're gonna skip ahead a bit to where I go for a Scarlet Aeonia, and I mistimed it and got hit by one of his cold fire thingies, but we still do a good amount of damage and of course get the Scarlet Rot off. And that Scarlet Rot chunks him down quite a bit. We do get some hits in between, but the Scarlet Rot did most of the damage, I'll be honest. And finally, towards the end of the fight, we run out of healing flasks, which isn't great, but as long as we can just dodge some of his attacks and survive, the Scarlet Rot should finish the job. So we do get some hits in with Vari's Bouquet in the meantime, and then he goes for his big, floaty, I don't know, blue fire attack, I don't know what to call that. And I try to risk it by dodging the attack with our floating Scarlet Aeonia, and it works. we finish the fight. Alright, with the Putrescent Night down, we only have 4 bosses left. So we go through these secret Shadow Keep tunnels, which eventually take us through these catacombs down here, and into a minor boss fight, which is actually one of my favorite boss fights in the entire game, and that's because you can backstab the entire time. The best part about this is that we actually died right at the end and lost, but our Scarlet Rot finished off Jory, so it still counted. That was great. And with the Abyssal Woods open to us, we can run through, safely hiding and making our way past the aging untouchables that guard the area. And before long, we find ourselves at Midra's manse and are able to complete the little puzzles inside to find Midra. And while here, we commit a bit of animal abuse and hurt this poor monkey before beginning the actual boss fight. Our first 2 attempts did end in failure, but we really don't need to talk about those, so let's go to the 3rd try. So the best part about this boss fight is always how easy it is to guard counter. Basically, all of his attacks are guard counterable, and he doesn't really have that much poise, so getting off poise breaks and riposts is just super easy, barely an inconvenience in this fight. And what makes it even better is that he doesn't really have a high bleed resist, so we can get a lot of bleeds off as well with Vare's Bouquet. So all in all, this isn't a very difficult fight, as long as you know how to dodge the right attacks at the right times. Which, for the first 2 attempts, was a bit hit or miss, but again, we don't need to talk about that. We get off a couple more poise breaks and bleeds, which takes him down pretty low, and before long, we are nearing the end of this fight. A couple of hits after the riposte will get a bleed off on Midra, taking him down to, well, what should be 1 shot, but in reality is actually like a 10 shot with Vare's Bouquet. So eventually, some light attacks take him low enough to finish the job. And with that, we can move on. 3 bosses to go, and the next one takes us to the Cathedral of Metyr. So we grab a necklace, ring a bell, and then we find ourselves past the Shadow Keep back gate, and in this beautiful field of flowers. Hold. Before continuing the journey, we plant a tree, and then head on to our next bell. So we ring the bell, take care of Anna down here, and now begins our fight with Metyr. Our first attempt quickly leads us to poisoning her with our whip, but she also beats us up pretty badly, which isn't great. Second attempt, we also lose pretty badly. Same with the 3rd, then probably the 4th too. Nah, just kidding, they say 4th time's the charm, and it certainly is here. Because although we get knocked out of our Scarlet Aeonia, we can heal back up, and actually manage to get one off, which does Scarlet Rot Metyr. And from here, rather than try to poison her with our whip, I actually want to get some more use out of our aspects of the Crucible Bloom, which is just one of the weirdest looking incantations I've ever seen, but it does some pretty good damage, so I can't complain. Upon beginning her 2nd phase, we are able to get another bloom off, which in tandem with the Scarlet Rot deals a solid amount of damage and takes her below half health. Eventually though, that Scarlet Rot does wear off, so we have to get off another Scarlet Aeonia to poison her once again. And it did take 2 of them, but from here on out, we are actually good to just run away and dodge. The Scarlet Rot will take care of the rest of the work. Of course, we're not going to do that, but we could if we wanted. And finally, she's low enough to where 1 poison flower blooms twice, finish the job. Metyr's defeated, leaving us with 2 bosses. And the first one forces us to go through the Shadow Keep once more, in order to get to the ancient ruins of Ra, and upon exiting the ruins we can find our way to Romina, Saint of the Bud. So I decided to bring in the Sunflower for Romina just due to its high base damage, and I'm probably going to use it for Radahn too just because this is one of my favorite weapons in the game. I mean, come on, it's literally just a giant sunflower, how could you not love that? And while we're here, I just want to shout out my channel members. Arthur, thank you so much for joining, my man. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to hearing from you. And if you have any challenge run ideas, please let me know. Of course, we also have Mary, Beer, and Micah. You guys are and have always been the best, so thank you for being a part of my member program thingy and supporting me and this channel and Daisy. Yeah, I truly do appreciate it so much. And if anybody wants to become a member at some point, it's always in the description of my videos. It basically just gets you shoutouts and early access to videos, as well as my undying love and affection. I also just want to say thank you to everybody who's still watching the video at this point, as well as everybody who comments every week. Like, I love catching up with you guys, so yeah, just thank you everybody for all of the support that you've given me. It really, really does mean the world. Anyway, while I was being sappy, we defeated Romina, and we can move on to the final boss. Well, try to move on to the final boss at least. We do, thankfully, successfully make our way through the treacherous and near limb and escape the Divine Warrior, which usually ends up taking our life, but we managed to survive this time, just barely. And as is customary, I will leave you to the Radon fight with awesome music in the background, courtesy of the Hades 2 Kronos boss fight if you guys were ever curious. But yeah, enjoy the fight, like and subscribe, you know the deal. I will catch up with you guys at the end. Alright, well, that was a pretty easy Radon fight, I think. The Sunflower really is just a great weapon, so I would definitely recommend trying it out, especially if you have a Strength and Faith build. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you want to subscribe, that'd be amazing, but if not, your viewership is always enough for me. So, thanks for coming around and watching my videos. I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.